My last video gave you the basics on how to play Dungeons & Dragons, and I said we would follow up with a look at the character sheet. And one of the most important things on your character sheet are your ability scores. In Dungeons & Dragons, there are 6 different types, and we're going to go over all 6 in just the next few minutes. One of the fun things about role-playing is you can choose a character who's not like you. They can do things that you couldn't do in real life, whether it's cast magic spells, or be super strong, be incredibly charming, or ridiculously fast on their feet. And the way the game reflects this is with ability scores. And there are 6 of them, and we're going to go over all 6 of them in the next few minutes. The first ability score we're going to look at is Strength.
I would like to...
Strength represents your ability to attack with melee weapons like swords and battle axes and great clubs. It also represents your athletic ability and even your ability to grapple and wrestle other creatures. The next ability score is Dexterity, which helps determine how nimble you are, and it represents your ability to shoot bow and arrows, use light weapons like daggers. It also represents your gross motor skills like acrobatics and stealth, as well as your fine motor skills like your ability to pick locks.
All it takes is a little finesse. Amateurs. That was my toothpick.
The third ability score on your character sheet is Constitution. It represents your fortitude, your ability to resist things like poison. It also demonstrates your ability to concentrate on magic. So if you're a spellcaster and you're casting the spell, you would have to use your Constitution ability to maintain your concentration and keep that spell going despite distracting stimuli in the environment. Constitution is also used to help determine how much damage you can take, because your Constitution bonus is added to your hit points. We'll get to those later. Intelligence is the next ability score we're going to look at. This not only represents how smart you are, it also represents how learned or educated you are. It influences what's called Arcana, the in-world ability to understand magic. Maybe even, if your DM allows it, to make magic items. It's also used for investigations like finding clues and making deductions, as well as history and research.
So what does it say?
Oh, it says pyramid, spirits of the dead, and right here in tiny letters it says Vax. All I can make out is one word of Delilah's craptastic scribble. Something called a zipper.
Okay, yeah, actually, I think it's a ziggurat.
Huh, thank God. Because what I was picturing was like, whoa.
Our fifth and next to last ability is Wisdom. So while intelligence focused on knowledge and education, wisdom focuses more on common sense and intuition. Wisdom governs things like tracking and survival and your ability to read maps and know the layout of the land. Therefore, it's responsible for your perception, your ability to find intruders or detect traps, and your insight, your ability to determine if someone's being sincere and if they are who they portray themselves to be.
I don't trust her.
You don't trust anyone.
Well, except you.
Funny way of showing it sometimes.
Last but not least is Charisma. And Charisma can simply be just how cool and stylish you look. It can also represent your ability to perform and act and pretend to be somebody you're not, or persuade others to your point of view, or even intimidate someone. Charisma is about 50-50 on whether or not it's going to get you out of trouble or into trouble.
Lady Allura, we appreciate the gravity of the situation and will present ourselves with the utmost dignity. Good one.
I shall brief them on royal etiquette and manners. You have my word.
Now, with that said, we are going to focus on our character sheet and zoom in on the ability scores themselves. And how do you create those ability scores for your player character? The easiest way to do it is with what's called Standard Array. Standard Array gives you a preset group of scores that you can assign to whichever ability score you choose. So if you want a big burly barbarian, you can put your highest score in your strength. If you want a clever cunning rogue, you can put your highest scores in Dexterity and Charisma. If you want a nature-loving druid, you can put your 2 highest scores in Wisdom and Intelligence. But it's up to you how you distribute these 6 numbers to your 6 ability scores. But always check with your Dungeon Master, because most DMs have a way that they want to do ability scores. In fact, many DMs will have what's called a Session 0, where people plan their characters, and that would be a perfect way to get help as a new player. The next thing that's important to know is that your character's species, also called race, and or their background can give you some bonuses to your ability scores. And those bonuses usually come in a +2 and a +1. So you can upgrade 2 of your ability scores with these 2 bonuses. So for today's example, I'm going to take my +1 and add it to my 15 to get a 16. Then I'm going to take my +2 and add it to my 13 to get a 15. So now I know what my starting ability scores are going to be, and I can start assigning them to my abilities. So let's say I want to make a wizard. So I'm going to take my highest score, my 16, and put that in my intelligence. Then I'll take the next highest score and put that in constitution to give me some extra survivability and help me concentrate on my spells. Then I'll take my third highest score and put that in my dexterity to help avoid getting hit, because dexterity affects your armor class, something we'll talk about later. Now that my top 3 scores are placed, I get to decide what to do with the bottom 3. Now it's time to decide which things do I not want to suck at. So I want my character to have some social skills, so I'll put my next highest score, the 12, into my charisma. Now a 10 represents an average ability. So by putting a 10 into my wisdom, my character's not bad at it, but they're not good at it either. So I would probably play this character as maybe a little bit naive, maybe even a little bit gullible. That's another thing you can do once your ability scores are placed. You can figure out how to roleplay a person with these attributes. And lastly, I put the 8 into strength. So there you have it. That's our wizard's ability scores. And now it's time to determine your ability modifiers. Each ability score has a corresponding ability modifier. So for every 2 points above 10, you get a +1 ability score modifier. And for every 2 points below 10, you get a -1 ability score modifier. So back to our wizard's ability scores, our 8 equals a modifier of -1. Our 10 equals a modifier of 0. Our 12 equals a modifier of +1. Our 14 equals a modifier of +2. Our 15, even though it's higher than 14, still only gives us a modifier of +2. So you see why even numbers are important when building your character. Lastly, our 16 gives us a modifier of +3. And that completes our wizard score ability modifiers. Now we want to put all of those on our character sheet. And when we do that, it looks something like this, because you want to record both the ability score and the modifier onto your character sheet. Now, most of the time, however, you're only going to be using the modifier in the game. And real quick, let me show you how to do that. But once you decide what you're going to do, Dungeon Master decides on a difficulty class. If the thing you're doing is easy difficulty, you need to roll a 10 or higher on a 20-sided dice. If it's medium difficulty, you would need to roll a 15 or higher on a 20-sided dice. But depending on what you're doing, you get to add your ability modifier to that roll. So here are some quick examples. So let's say my wizard, the one we just made, is walking through the dungeon and I decide I want to cross a rickety bridge over a tar pit. The Dungeon Master tells me that it's medium difficulty, so I have to roll a 15 or higher and I have to use Dexterity to do it. My wizard's dexterity is a +2, so I roll the d20, I get a 7. 7 + 2 is only a 9, so I do not succeed. My wizard is now dangling off the edge of this rickety bridge in desperate need of help before he slips into the tar. But now the Dungeon Master gives me another chance to climb back up onto the bridge before I fall all the way into the tar. So I roll the dice again, and I get a 15. For a total of 17, I successfully climb back up onto the rickety bridge. So now that the wizard has crossed the bridge, he finds a stuck door. And in order to open this door, it requires an easy strength check, a difficulty class of 10. Now my wizard's strength has a -1 modifier. So I roll the dice and get a 7, and at a -1, that's only a total of 6, I can't get past the door. So now, instead of trying to go through that door, my wizard is going to make an investigation check to find another way around. So my wizard carefully studies the area to look for another way out of the dungeon. The Dungeon Master says it's a difficulty of 10, and I have an intelligence of +3. So I roll the dice, and I get a 7. Total of 10. I succeed. I find another way out of the dungeon. My wizard is now safe. These basic mechanics are exactly enough to get you playing Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, you could play the game with just these mechanics alone. However, once you sit down to play a game with a group of friends, you can learn more and more about your character sheet and your character and how this game can take on all sorts of nuances and challenges and exciting possibilities. In the meantime, with everything you've learned from this video and my last video, you should be armed with enough knowledge to sit down and play the game with the help of some other good players. So hopefully you feel more confident about diving into this fantastic opportunity of Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button because you can learn all about Dungeons & Dragons from this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Dire Den.